The air in the office was sterile, sharp with the scent of lemon polish and underlying anxiety. It clung to the back of my throat like something I'd swallowed wrong years ago and could never quite cough up. My fingers, numb despite the overheated room, traced the raised lettering on the envelope. Not mine. His. Misdelivered to my home office desk, slipped through the mail slot earlier that morning like a cruel, personalized fortune cookie. It bore the logo of his company, the travel agency, but it was addressed to him, marked confidential, personal. My breath hitched, a small, silent snag in my chest. He'd been acting strange for months. Distant. Late nights at the office. The usual excuses, thin and see-through as tracing paper if you held them up to the light. I hadn't wanted to hold them up. Not really. It was easier to pretend the light wasn't there. But this envelope felt heavy, consequential. My hands trembled as I slid a letter opener under the flap. Inside, a single sheet of paper, crisp and white. A booking confirmation. 2 first-class tickets. A luxury overwater bungalow. Dates that coincided perfectly with his last business trip, the one he'd insisted I couldn't join because of sensitive client meetings. Bora Bora. The name itself felt like a punch to the gut. Bora Bora. The place you go for honeymoons, for grand romantic gestures, for escaping the real world with someone you want to forget it with. Not for sensitive client meetings in windowless conference rooms. My eyes scanned the names. His name. And another. A woman's name. One I didn't recognize. Not a client. Not his sister. Just a name. A stark, brutal declaration printed in impersonal font, laid bare on the page. The blood drained from my face, leaving a cold, buzzing emptiness behind. My own name seemed to shrink inside my head, irrelevant, a forgotten footnote in the lavish script of his life. Bora Bora. My college fund. The two ideas slammed into each other in my mind like colliding planets, a silent, cataclysmic explosion that rearranged my entire universe in an instant. The numbers swam before my eyes, but I didn't need to see them clearly. I knew. I felt the void where the money should have been. The carefully saved, painstakingly built-up foundation of my future, gone. Used for this. For him and her. In Bora Bora. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. The world outside the small office window continued unaware. Cars hummed past. A bird chirped somewhere in the distance. Inside, my world had stopped spinning. It hung suspended, fragile and broken, like a dropped ornament. The confirmation lay on the desk, a physical manifestation of betrayal. The clean lines, the simple font, the extravagant details, they mocked me with their ordinariness. How could something so devastating look so normal? My fingers clenched into fists, the paper crumpling slightly. The smell of lemon polish suddenly made me nauseous. This wasn't just a trip. This was years of my life. Years I had worked, saved, sacrificed. Years I had trusted. The college fund wasn't just money, it was a promise. A promise to myself, a promise whispered in quiet moments about a future I was building. It was late nights studying while working full-time, packing my own lunches to save a few dollars, saying no to things I wanted, so I could say yes to a dream later. And he knew. He knew exactly what that money meant to me. We had talked about it, about me finally getting my degree, the one I'd put on hold when life happened, when he happened. He'd been supportive, or so I thought. He'd watched me squirrel it away, dollar by dollar, for years. And then he'd taken it. Not just taken it, but used it to fund his infidelity. The sheer, audacious cruelty of it stole my breath all over again. A cold rage, unlike anything I had ever known, began to seep into the emptiness. It wasn't a hot, fiery anger. It was cold, hard, and sharp like broken glass. It settled in my bones, chilling me to the core. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen my future, my trust, my dignity. He'd used the very foundation I was building for myself to build a fantasy world for himself and another woman. In Bora Bora. The name echoed in my head, a constant, infuriating refrain. Bora Bora. Paid for with my sweat, my dreams, my deferred hopes. I sat there for a long time, the crumpled paper in my hand, the sterile office air thick with the scent of betrayal. My mind was a chaotic storm of images and emotions. Memories of our wedding day, his vows, his smile. Memories of quiet evenings, planning our future, his hand in mine. These memories warred with the brutal reality of the booking confirmation, the stark evidence of his deceit. How could the same person exist in both realities? The man I loved, the man who had promised to cherish me, and the man who had plundered my future to run off with someone else. The disconnect was dizzying, sickening. I needed proof. More than this. My fingers, still trembling, fumbled with my laptop. Online banking. The college fund account. I logged in, my heart hammering against my ribs. The screen loaded slowly, each second an eternity. There. The balance. Dramatically lower than it should have been. A large withdrawal. Dated just days before his business trip. Memo line, blank. No explanation. Just a gaping hole where my future used to be. I cross-referenced the amount with the cost of the Bora Bora trip listed on the confirmation. The numbers matched sickeningly. Almost to the penny. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. Deliberate. He had planned this. He had seen my fund, seen the years of sacrifice it represented, and decided it was simply a convenient pool of cash for his sordid little getaway. The coldness of it was staggering. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of entitlement. My money, my future, was just another resource for him to exploit. My body felt heavy, rooted to the chair, yet my mind was racing, a frantic animal trapped in a cage. What do I do? Divorce, obviously. But that felt too simple. Too clean. He gets to walk away, maybe lose some assets, but the fundamental damage he'd done to me, to my sense of self, my ability to trust, that wouldn't be addressed. And the money divorce court was messy, uncertain. Could I even prove this specific money, my college fund, was used this way? It was just money in an account. Fungible. He could claim anything. He could lie, twist the narrative, make me out to be the hysterical wife who couldn't handle his success, his business trips. The thought of facing him, of him lying to my face again, made me want to scream. The initial shock began to morph into something harder, something born of the cold rage that had settled in my bones. This wasn't just about recovering money. This was about justice. Not legal justice, necessarily. Something more personal. He needed to understand the depth of his betrayal. He needed to lose something that mattered to him as much as my future had mattered to me. What mattered to him? His job. His career. His travel agency. He was proud of it, overly so. He lived and breathed that place. It was his identity, his validation. The thought flickered, then grew, a dark seed taking root in the barren ground of my despair. What if? What if I didn't just leave him? What if I fought back in a way he could never anticipate? The idea felt impossible at first. Acquiring a business? Me? I was just me. The wife, the one saving for her degree, the one who handled the household bills and cheered him on from the sidelines. But the more I thought about it, the more a twisted kind of logic emerged. He used my foundation to build his pleasure trip. Maybe I could use his foundation to build my retribution. The immediate aftermath of finding the confirmation was a blur of disbelief, pain, and the nascent stirrings of something dangerous. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. I felt like a live wire, sparking and dangerous, and I knew if I spoke, it would all explode into accusations and denials, and he would just lie again. I needed time to think, to process, to let the cold rage solidify into something useful, something strategic. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, the Bora Bora confirmation a silent accuser on my desk. Every memory of our life together was now tainted, seen through the lens of this betrayal. Was any of it real? Had he always been capable of this? The questions gnawed at me, relentless. Sleep was impossible. My body ached with tension, my head throbbed. The house, usually a sanctuary, felt like a prison. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow seemed to mock me. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity born of exhaustion and cold resolve. The raw pain was still there, a deep, bruising ache, but the hysteria was gone. In its place was a quiet, steely determination. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't even explain. He wasn't going to get the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would fight back, not with emotion but with cold, calculated action. My first step was to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I needed someone sharp, someone who understood complex financial situations, someone who wouldn't flinch at the ugliness of it all. I spent hours researching, poring over websites, making discreet calls. The first few consultations were disheartening. They talked about divorce settlements, asset division, the difficulty of tracing specific funds used for personal expenses. It was all about splitting what was left, not about recovering what was taken or, more importantly, inflicting a consequence that matched the scale of the betrayal. One lawyer, a formidable woman with eyes like chips of ice, listened patiently as I laid out the facts: the college fund, the missing money, the Bora Bora trip confirmation, the other woman's name. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken judgment. Then she leaned forward. "Getting the money back will be difficult," she stated, her voice low and even. "Proving intent, tracing the specific funds. It's complicated. And honestly, divorce court is often about cutting losses, not achieving poetic justice." Poetic justice. The phrase resonated deep within me. That was exactly what I wanted. Not just a legal settlement, but a reckoning that reached into the core of his arrogant, deceitful heart. "What about the agency?" I asked, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "His business. Is there any way to go after that?" She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something that might have been interest in her cool gaze. "He owns a significant stake, yes. It would be part of the marital assets, potentially. But taking over the business entirely? That's a different matter." "Why would you want to do that?" I hesitated, formulating the words carefully. I couldn't tell her about the cold rage, the need for a specific, targeted blow. I had to frame it legally, financially. "It's tied to the source of his deception," I said, choosing my words deliberately. "He used his position, his access, maybe even agency resources, to facilitate this. It feels appropriate, like it should be part of the consequence." She considered this, tapping a pen against her notepad. "It's highly unconventional," she admitted. "Divorce focuses on dividing existing assets, not enabling one party to acquire the other's business. Unless you had a pre-existing claim, or unless there was evidence the business itself was used illicitly in a way that could be compensated by transferring ownership. It's a long shot. You'd need significant capital, first of all. And the owner would have to be willing to sell their stake to you." Significant capital. The very thing he had stolen from me. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. It seemed impossible. A long shot. The lawyer's words echoed the despair I had felt initially. But the cold rage hadn't dissipated. It had intensified. It fueled a stubborn refusal to accept the easy path, the path that would leave him relatively unscathed while I was left picking up the pieces of a shattered life and a depleted future. I left the lawyer's office feeling both defeated and galvanized. The legal route seemed inadequate for the scale of the emotional damage. But the seed had been planted. The agency. His world. That was where I needed to strike. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet, clandestine activity. I maintained a facade of normalcy at home, a chilling performance of the unsuspecting wife. He was oblivious, still distracted, still, I assumed, caught up in the glow of his ill-gotten paradise or its immediate aftermath. Every interaction was a tightrope walk, a silent scream held behind a placid smile. Inside, I was a whirlwind of research and planning. I started by learning everything I could about his travel agency. I accessed public records, searched business databases, read industry reports. I learned about the ownership structure, key employees, financial performance. It was a private company, but not entirely opaque. His stake was substantial, but he wasn't the sole owner. There was a senior partner, a man named Arthur Vance, who owned the majority share. Acquiring the agency meant convincing Arthur Vance to sell, or finding another way in. This is where the long shot became almost insurmountable. Why would the majority owner sell to the disgruntled wife of his cheating partner? It seemed ridiculous on the face of it. I hit wall after wall. Rejections from potential investors who thought my plan was too risky, too emotionally driven. Lawyers who gently steered me back towards conventional divorce proceedings. Friends who urged me to just leave, to focus on healing, to let go of the anger. Let go? How could I let go when the evidence of his betrayal, the theft of my future, was burned into my mind? The thought of him sitting on a beach in Bora Bora, laughing with her, knowing he'd funded it with my dreams. Letting go felt like surrendering, like letting him win. And I would not let him win. The deepening crisis point came when I discovered the agency was actually facing financial difficulties. Not enough to sink it immediately, but enough to make Arthur Vance restless. He was older, nearing retirement, and apparently tired of the industry's volatile market. Rumors were circulating that he was looking for a buyer. This was a potential opening, a crack in the insurmountable wall. But it was a tiny crack, and time was running out. If he sold to a larger corporation, as was rumored, my chance would be gone. I needed leverage. Something significant enough to make Arthur Vance consider an offer from an unlikely source like me. Something that would make him look past the messy personal drama and see a viable business transaction. My research intensified. I dug deeper into the agency's history, its clients, its operations. I looked for weaknesses, vulnerabilities, anything that might give me an edge. I spent late nights poring over financial statements, legal filings, even gossip from industry forums. It felt like searching for a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Despair gnawed at the edges of my resolve. It was too hard, too complicated. Maybe the lawyers were right. Maybe I should just cut my losses, get what I could in a divorce, and try to rebuild my life somewhere else. But then I thought of Bora Bora. The white sands, the clear water, the overwater bungalow. The image of him there, carefree, with her, fueled the cold rage anew. No. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not like this. A breakthrough came unexpectedly, buried deep within a rabbit hole of archaic business regulations and local permits. I stumbled upon a detail about the agency's original incorporation, decades ago. A minor legal loophole regarding a specific type of license they held for a niche area of travel, something related to charter flights for specialized cargo, a part of the business I hadn't paid much attention to. It seemed insignificant, but the details were complex, tied to specific performance clauses that, if not met, could jeopardize the license itself. Further digging revealed that in recent years, as the agency focused more on luxury leisure travel, like, say, Bora Bora trips, that niche cargo business had dwindled. The performance clauses tied to the valuable license were apparently not being met. And Arthur Vance, focused on selling the main business, seemed to have overlooked this potentially critical detail. His partner, my husband, likely hadn't cared. His focus was clearly elsewhere. This wasn't just a minor compliance issue. Losing this specific license would significantly devalue the agency, making it less attractive to potential corporate buyers. It was a ticking time bomb hidden in plain sight. This was my leverage. The realization hit me like a physical shock, a jolt of adrenaline through my weary body. It was risky. It involved threatening to expose this vulnerability if Vance didn't sell to me. It was leverage born not just from cunning, but from the unique position I was in, married to an insider, giving me access, albeit indirect and piecemeal, to information others wouldn't have. He'd given me the weapon unknowingly by being careless, arrogant, and distracted by his affair. My turning point arrived in a sterile, silent conference room, the air conditioning humming like a judgmental chorus. I sat across from Arthur Vance, the majority owner of the travel agency. My lawyer was beside me, her posture radiating calm competence. Vance looked weary, his face etched with the stress of trying to offload a business in a difficult market. He clearly saw me as a nuisance, the emotional fallout from his partner's messy personal life. I had put together a proposal. Not just an offer to buy, but a detailed outline of the agency's financial situation, including the precarious state of that specific, vital cargo license. I showed him the regulations, the performance clauses, the evidence that they weren't being met. I laid it all out, calmly, dispassionately. His initial reaction was dismissive. He waved a hand. That old thing? We haven't focused on cargo in years. It's not material to the main business. My lawyer's voice was quiet but firm. Mr. Vance, our analysis shows that the value of that license, while not currently exploited, represents a significant portion of the agency's intangible assets. More importantly, its potential loss due to noncompliance creates a material risk that would absolutely impact the valuation for any corporate buyer. It could derail a sale entirely, or at least force a significant price reduction. This isn't about the cargo business itself. It's about the structural integrity of the company you're trying to sell. Vance paled slightly. He hadn't done his due diligence on that specific, dormant corner of his business. He'd been too focused on the big picture, the luxury travel market his partner excelled at selling, even if he was selling it to the wrong people. My husband's negligence, his complete disinterest in anything that wasn't glamorous and profitable, had blinded both of them to this vulnerability. My voice was steady as I spoke, the cold rage a solid core inside me. Mr. Vance, I am prepared to buy your stake in the agency. My offer is fair, based on the true, non-risk-adjusted valuation of the company before this issue becomes public or is discovered by another buyer. I have secured the necessary financing, this was true, thanks to a combination of exhausting every personal resource, leveraging what few assets I had left outside the college fund, and securing a small, high-interest loan based on a wildly optimistic projection of the agency's future under new management, my management. It was a terrifying gamble, but there was no going back. In exchange, I continued, looking him directly in the eye, you sell to me, quietly, quickly. This issue remains confidential. You get your retirement. Your reputation remains intact. The alternative is that I pursue this matter through the appropriate channels, which would likely involve regulatory scrutiny, public exposure of the agency's noncompliance, and a significant devaluation of your asset, making it almost impossible to sell for anything close to what you're hoping for. It was a threat, a calculated, cold-blooded maneuver. It felt strange, using such tactics. The woman who had been saving for her college degree, was now leveraging arcane business regulations to force a sale. Betrayal had changed me. It had hardened me, sharpened me into something I didn't recognize. Vance stared at me, then at my lawyer, then back at the documents outlining his agency's hidden flaw. The silence stretched, thick with tension. He weighed his options. A messy, public exposure that would crater his retirement plans, or a quiet sale to the wronged wife of his negligent partner, a woman who somehow knew more about the dusty corners of his business than he did. He sighed, a sound of defeat. This is unprecedented, he muttered. Desperate times call for unconventional solutions, I replied, the dry humor a brittle shield. After tense negotiations, he agreed. He would sell his majority stake to me. The details were finalized swiftly, quietly, shrouded in legal confidentiality. It was done. The agency. His world. It was about to become mine. The day I walked into the agency as the new owner felt surreal. My stomach churned with a mixture of triumph and nausea. The familiar logo above the door, the one I'd seen on his business cards for years, now felt like a personal challenge. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The office was bustling, phones ringing, agents typing at their keyboards, the air filled with the low murmur of travel plans being made. It smelled faintly of stale coffee and anticipation, the buzz before a big trip. For so long, this place had just been where my husband worked. Now it was mine. Every desk, every computer, every booking, every employee. Mine. I walked towards the back, towards the corner office with the glass walls, the one he occupied. My heart hammered against my ribs. a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the office. He was inside, on the phone, leaning back in his chair, looking relaxed, confident. He hadn't seen me yet. The door was ajar. I pushed it open the rest of the way and stepped inside. He looked up, a smile already forming, assuming it was one of his employees. The smile froze on his face. Literally. The muscles in his cheeks seemed to seize, his eyes widened. The phone dropped from his hand, clattering onto the desk. He stared at me, his mind clearly struggling to process my presence here, now in this office. His office. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face, usually so expressive, so good at feigning emotion, was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked like he had seen a ghost, or perhaps the physical embodiment of his worst nightmare. What are you doing here? He finally stammered, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. I closed the door quietly behind me. The office suddenly felt very small, very still. The hum of the outer office faded away. It was just us and the silence. I came to see my new acquisition, I said, my voice calm, steady, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. His eyes narrowed in confusion, then widened again as the meaning of my words began to sink in. Acquisition? New acquisition? Here. What are you talking about? He demanded, finding his voice, though it still lacked its usual arrogant swagger. I walked towards his desk, towards him. He watched me, wary, like a cornered animal. I stopped in front of the desk, placing my hands flat on the polished surface. The wood felt solid, real. Unlike everything else in my life recently. Arthur Vance signed the papers yesterday, I explained, keeping my voice low. I now own the majority stake in this agency. Every chair, every computer, every client list. And yes, every employee contract. I paused, letting that sink in. Including yours. His face crumpled, disbelief warring with dawning horror.
You
can't, he whispered.
How?
How did you even? Remember that college fund, the one you emptied to take her to Bora Bora? I asked, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. That was my future. You stole it. You used the very foundation I was building for myself to build a fantasy for you and your mistress. I watched his eyes flick away at the mention of Bora Bora and her. He knew. He knew I knew. Well, I continued, a cold satisfaction spreading through me, chilling but potent. I decided that if you could use my foundation for your pleasure, I could use your foundation for my justice. I leaned in slightly. You were so focused on the big, shiny luxury trips on the easy money, you got careless. You and Vance both. You forgot about the details. The boring stuff. Like the cargo license, for instance. The one tied to performance clauses that haven't been met in years. His eyes flickered with sudden understanding, a flicker of recognition of the dusty corner of the business he'd ignored. Losing that license would have tanked the sale price, I said, spelling it out for him. Vance couldn't afford to let that happen. Not with his retirement on the line. So, when presented with a choice, a messy, public implosion that would cost him everything, or a quiet sale to the woman who somehow knew his dirty secret, he chose the quiet sale. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. I used the leverage your own negligence, your own distraction with her, created. I used what you took from me. My drive, my willingness to dig, my refusal to be a victim, to take what mattered most to you. Your world. Your identity. This agency. He sat there, behind his desk, in his chair in his office, and he was frozen. Completely, utterly frozen. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes fixed on me, unseeing. The arrogant confidence, the smooth charm, the practiced lies, they were all gone, stripped away by the shock of being blindsided. He hadn't just been caught, he had been strategically dismantled, piece by piece, using the very tools his own actions had put into my hands. He had underestimated me completely. He had seen me as a predictable, emotional wife. He had never imagined the cold, strategic mind that betrayal could forge. The silence stretched again, punctuated only by the faint sounds from the outer office, the life of the agency that was no longer his. He was trapped in this moment, paralyzed by the unforeseen consequences of his actions. He had expected tears, accusations, maybe a bitter divorce. He had never expected this. He had never expected me to turn his own game against him, to use his rules, his world, to build my own victory. He tried to speak again, a choked sound this time.
But
the money, the college fund. Consider it a down payment, I said, my voice softening slightly, not with kindness, but with the chilling finality of a door slamming shut. On my education. On my future. A future you tried to steal, but which I took back. With interest, I took a deep breath, the sterile office air feeling cleaner somehow now. The storm inside me wasn't over, but the eye of the storm was here, in this moment of his absolute, crushing defeat. It wasn't pure triumph. It was heavy, weighted with the loss of the life I thought I had, the man I thought I knew. But beneath the weight, there was a core of hard-won strength, a sense of vindication that settled deep in my bones. I hadn't just survived. I had prevailed. On my own terms. I looked at him, still frozen, a monument to his own undoing. The man who had taken my dreams and used them for his selfish desires. Now, he had nothing. He had lost his wife, his mistress, presumably, though I didn't care, and the very source of his pride and identity. He had traded my future for a few days in paradise, and the price was everything. This is my office now, I said, my voice regaining its strength. And this is my agency. Your services are no longer required. The aftermath was complex, a tangled web of legal formalities, business operations, and emotional processing. He was forced out, quietly, swiftly. The employees were shocked. Rumors flew. But the official line was a change in ownership structure and partner dissolution. The full truth remained confined to that office, between him, Vance, my lawyer, and me. Taking over the agency was daunting. It wasn't just about the revenge. It was about making it work, making it profitable, turning it into something real and sustainable. I had acquired it out of cold rage and strategic necessity, but now I had to learn to run it. It was a steep learning curve, filled with challenges I hadn't anticipated in the heat of the moment. But every challenge I overcame felt like another layer of strength added to my foundation. The Bora Bora trip, the college fund, the betrayal, they were the fire that had forged me. I hadn't gotten my college degree in the way I had planned. Instead, I was getting an education in business, in resilience, in the harsh realities of human nature. The agency, born from my pain, was becoming something new, something I was building myself, brick by brick. The cold rage began to subside, replaced by a quiet determination. The vindication was satisfying, yes, but it wasn't a substitute for happiness. I had won the battle, but the war for my own peace and future was still ongoing. I started focusing on the business, on my employees, on the clients. I implemented changes, streamlined operations, and slowly, painstakingly, began to turn things around. The money from the college fund was gone, spent on a tropical paradise that was now a symbol of his ruin. But I was earning new money, building new capital, and the knowledge that I had used his own ambition and deceit to create my own opportunity was a powerful, if bittersweet, source of strength. Sometimes, late at night, when the office was empty and silent, I would sit at the desk in what had been his office, the one I now occupied, and look out at the city lights. I would think about that booking confirmation, the one that had shattered my world and forced me to rebuild it from the ground up. I had lost so much, but I had also found something I didn't know I possessed, a resilience I never knew I had, a strategic mind hidden beneath years of compliance. I hadn't just survived. I had transformed. I wasn't the woman who had saved for a degree anymore. I was the woman who owned a business, who had faced down betrayal and come out on the other side, scarred but unbroken. The path wasn't the one I had planned, but it was mine. And I was walking it, step by painful, powerful step, towards a future I was building, not with borrowed money, but with my own 2 hands and a will forged in fire. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.